Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Shani Delaney, and we're living in a world where AI can generate entire people out of thin air, where a fake voice can get a bank transfer approved, and where insiders, trusted employees, can be manipulated without ever meeting an adversary face to face. The biggest threat to organizations right now isn't just malware or bad passwords, it's trust. Who do you trust in your network and your systems, your teams? And how do you know that that trust hasn't been compromised? It's like my children telling me lies every day. I just can't trust them. I am super, super excited to introduce our panel members. I'm going to kind of jump around, but first we have the lovely Aviva Yorkovich. She is a former senior officer and head of R&D in the Deception Detection Unit of the Israeli Intelligence Agency, as well as senior investigator and handler. She's a recognized expert in polygraphs and credibility assessments. I need to bring you to talk to my kids. And she has advised governments and global organizations on fraud prevention. She's now the co-founder and CEO of Validate.ai, a pioneering startup in disinformation security that combines AI and physio-behavioral science to validate truth and intent in real time. It's cool stuff, people. Also, we've got Alfredo Ramirez, as Senior Director Analyst for Gartner's Emerging Technologies and Trends, or ETT Security Division. Alfredo brings more than 2 decades of elite experience in the technology sector. His distinguished career encompasses deep technical acumen, strategic competitive intelligence, and pioneering product leadership. Alfredo is a sought-after authority on the convergence of cybersecurity, agentic AI, dissemination, and identity, providing actionable insight to global leaders shaping the future of digital security. He is super, super interesting to chat with, by the way. Stephen Ryan, who is super fun, is a seasoned executive and serial entrepreneur with more than 30 years of experience. He's currently the Chief Revenue Officer for iVix, an AI-based OSINT forensic company that helps governments around the world illuminate large-scale financial crimes such as money laundering and sanctions evasion and tax noncompliance at speed and at scale. Stephen previously held executive positions within a blockchain forensics company, a major credit card processor, global payment system, a global bank, and several innovative security startups. And then Yael Ehrman has been Chief Technology Officer of Silverstein Properties since 2018, leading the company's technology vision and strategy. She drives the technology group in transforming bold ideas into innovative solutions and partners with startups and entrepreneurs to pilot cutting-edge technologies. With leadership experience spanning energy, biotech, and pharmaceuticals, Yael brings entrepreneurial insight and broad industry expertise to drive innovation across the built environment. I would say this is a stacked panel, if you ask me, and I'm super, super excited to dive into this. So I would love if, and I'm just going to throw some of these questions out for everybody, but my first question is, has the rise of Gen AI changed the landscape of protecting against disinformation? How do disinformation threats differ from traditional cybersecurity threats, and what unique approaches are required to address them?
Yeah, and thanks for that introduction, Shani. And I'd love to take a shot at that one because I think about this a lot, right? So, of course, disinformation and information warfare have been going on time immemorial, right? And then we had sort of the digital estate and the rise of the internet come online and making it much easier to publish your view, disinformation or otherwise, with or without attribution. And now here we are at this, Gen AI era, and it's made it much, much easier to generate content at scale, to translate that content into virtually any language, to impersonate any individual from a picture or a video, to impersonate any voice from 30 seconds of audio, and to automate the cultivation of fake profiles with established viewpoints to pose as humans and sell influence as a service, right? So that's sort of where we find ourselves today is all of those capabilities at a very low cost and low barrier to entry in terms of technical know-how to perform these actions. And then when we think about between traditional cybersecurity and sort of what disinformation as a bucket of technologies represents, we have a situation right now where folks that are in the cybersecurity area are separate and apart from folks who are doing work within disinformation point solutions like narrative intelligence, deepfake detection, truth assessment, things like that. And these things don't share signals, right? So you can't share signals easily from disinformation point solutions like that to cybersecurity technologies and signals. So CISOs don't really have this telemetry and tools available to them to take action. And CMOs and chief comms officers have fundamentally different concerns than CISOs if they even are utilizing these tools. So essentially, what we kind of need on a go-forward basis here is to be able to share signals easily between narrative intel, deepfake detection to cybersecurity tools, and organizations are going to have to, establish ownership of these different issues as they come up between the CISO and chief comms officer, or consider a dedicated role to coordinate for, disinformation incidents handling.
Interesting. Anyone else want to jump on this? It makes me think a lot also, not just the tools, but the education, making sure these people in these different groups understand what these threats are and how they work, right?
Absolutely. And you would think that, there's a lot around, for instance, deepfake detection, account takeover, right? They're going to call into the help desk. They're going to ask to change a password because they sound like the CFO or the CMO, or wire some money. And everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them, right?
Right.
Even though we know it's happening everywhere. And I think that, to your point, is a great one, right? And this is slower moving, but we're also seeing that in markets as well. Some new vendors that are, looking to displace the know-befores of the world and saying, hey, we'll deepfake your leadership, right? And test you all against that. And if we breach, then here's some learnings around it. And once you see that deepfake of yourself or your leadership, it really changes, how real it becomes for an organization.
I
Absolutely.
think that's yeah, I think the situation totally changed the game and changed the determination. Like we are all the time focusing on how we will keep our network from breaking. And I think that the attitude, the approach should be different. Should be how we can protect not only the system, but also from a human being layer perspective, like knowing whether the person is the real person and can I trust him. And this is the totally different, like the new battle is on the human layer and not only on the network layer.
Totally agree. Looks like we've got a poll that has popped up. What is a key limitation of traditional verification methods used by agencies? So we have four options. They only check identity, not the truthfulness of statements. They are always too expensive. They replace human agents completely, or they work only in financial institutions. So if everyone could check their question or check their answer, we should have results pop up here in a few seconds. I always love seeing how the polls come in. Everyone got their answers in? All right. I don't know if I should just move to question 2 while we wait for the results, which I'm going to do. I'm not saying results yet. And if they pop up, super. So I kind of want to.
Let me add something to the
Yeah,
beginning, because just to kind of put stuff in context, I think what Gen AI has done is just turbocharge this whole issue about validating trust and who can you trust. There used to be a saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Well, not anymore. It might not be a duck. It might just be Gen AI. So you really have to think about that. And I think we all need to figure out how to continuously monitor trust on a forward-looking basis, right? Identity is all about what happened in the past, but we need to look at what the intent is and where they're going in the future. But
Absolutely. I always tell people it's motivations. What are the threat actors' motivations? And you have to think, you have to put yourselves in their shoes, right? So the second question I have is kind of mapping the threat landscape and verification failures. So over the past 18 months, insider threats and synthetic identities and disinformation campaigns, they've all accelerated inside, well, all organizations, but especially inside federal agencies. So what has truly changed about the threat surface? And when we look at cases like insider fraud, Coinbase, or fake credentials slipping through a system, what do those incidents reveal about the cracks in our current verification processes? Don't all jump in at once. It's too crazy.
Yeah. So for me, as a former intelligence officer, it's pretty clear that the old system isn't working. Like dealing with identity checked alone isn't good enough. So you need to look much further and look and what Steve before said for the intent, understanding what is the motivation and whether the employee is trusted not only at the beginning while onboarding to the company or to the agency, but to know what happens in checkpoints during his career. So understanding what to do, because the motivation is change, money, frustration, or whatever happens to a human being in his life, can in a minute change him to be, if we're talking on something extremely in the intelligence world, for a kind of a spy. But also, if we are talking about the commercial industry, we can talk about doing any kind of a damage, fraud, or any kind of stealing information. So I think that what must be changed is covering this blind spot with a real-time human validation. And this is what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great point, Aviva, right? We kind of need, if you have the behavioral baseline to start with, and then it starts to waver, anomalous, right? When you start to see anomalous behavior, that should raise risk levels, right? As taking that context, when that individual goes to do something that is more higher security item that maybe they do fairly often, but now the risk level is raised, you should have a way of being able to introduce a step up, right? Authentication or authorization that would verify the individual again for doing whatever that step or that task is. It's multiple signals that help with the context, and that ongoing verification becomes key at that point.
And I totally agree. Organizations every day think, like Steven said, it can't happen to me, or Alfredo, you said that, right? It's really very frustrating. And I think bringing up the tools and having these additional layers of verification, I'll add, a lot of organizations I still work with are only relying on human reporting, internal reporting. They don't have budget. They have not made budget for these tools. And so I keep telling them they're barely scraping the surface.
I can add that as a real estate company that does many deals with big amounts, we see a step up in the sophistication of the attempts. We forever and ever we had some attempts, wire fraud and other attempts, and we see a step, really an upgrade of all these attempts. They are much more sophisticated. And it's like the tools that we use in the past to deal with these attempts are not valid anymore.
Yeah, I concur. And I will probably be on an education soapbox for a while here. As these technologies are evolving, they've done studies, and over half of organizations are not providing training in how to spot a deepfake, just simple things like that.
And this is why we went with Validate, because they provide another layer that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone else do it. And Aviva, I'm going to actually direct this next question at you first. Identity tells us who someone was, but intent tells us who they are becoming. And most verification systems, they stop at identity. So how can agencies start getting better at spotting intent, at detecting deception before the damage is done?
So I guess that some of the participants in this webinar that coming from the intelligence or the agency world and then understand how challenging is to spot intent before something bad happens. But I think that there is a way to do it. If you can create any kind of a tool that can in real time, on the spot, actually validating the human statement, then you can provide a risk layer. And this is the way to detect before something happens. So I cannot know what is the intention of the person without checking it. I cannot know whether in the past, for example, he did things that aren't in the background data or the background checks. So the way to do it is to add another layer. And unfortunately, because in the traditional way, this layer was a polygraph or any kind of a gold standard investigation, this is not something that any company can afford, not only from the budget side, but also from the environment side or any kind of attitude to the employees. And also, if you're talking about state police, they don't have the budget or the resources to have thousands of police officers that will we will conduct a periodic test and other tests to validate the employees' trust. So I think that if you can find and use an AI tool that can provide you an accuracy, easy to use, without any need to be a specialist, a polygraph level validation, then you can detect intent and prevent it before something happened.
Absolutely. Oh, it looks like we have a second poll question. Which recent threats were highlighted as growing risks for U.S. agencies? You only pick one: natural disasters and climate change, disinformation, insider threats, and synthetic identities, employee turnover and budget cuts, or traditional crime like burglary. I know what my answer would be, but I am totally biased. All right, since the last one didn't pop up the answer, I'm going to keep going just in case, and if it pops up, I will address it when it pops up with results. Did anyone else want to add anything to my last question before we move on? All right, so let's get into
So,
debates.
Shawnee, the
Yeah.
one thing just everybody should think about is if you look at traditional cybersecurity, the tools that are out there today, they're really trying to protect against not allowing bad code, malicious code to get in your system, be a ransomware or something like this. This takes a completely different sort of thought process and a different set of tools to find out that human risk, that forward-looking stuff. So I think having everybody recognize the old ways of doing stuff, while they're still very important and you don't want to let your guard down, there's a new threat vector here, and it's the human risk. And you need to ask the question, not who is this person, but do they actually still belong here? Should they be on this project? Why are they here? It's like, what's the intent? So back
Yeah,
to you.
absolutely. And to that point, we are seeing so many deep fakes with, everyone from job recruiters to employees being hired, right? So when we talk about deep fakes and even synthetic documents, they have moved well beyond Hollywood special effects. They are incredibly good now. So now, like I said, dealing with all of these fake recruiters and fake dossiers and fake employees, and luckily some organizations have been transparent and shared their lessons so that other people can learn from them, and kudos to them for doing that. But how can agencies tell signal from noise without drowning in false positives? That's everybody's greatest fear, is all of those false positives.
So as I see it, and what worries me is the noise, as you mentioned, Shawnee. And I think that when everything looks suspicious, you don't know where to focus in. So what I believe the answer is adding another layer that can filter this noise. And you can filter this noise by a new approach, validating the human interaction. And then you can divide who are good to go and with whom you need to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, again, on the deepfake employee thing, there are tools like yours that can detect if you are interviewing a deepfake, right?
Yeah, but it's not only in employees use case. This is one of the use case, but we can talk about any online application for ESTA, for example, like for the immigration or border control, any process that you are doing online. So if you would like to validate that it's not imposter, it's a real person, not like in the case of the North Koreans. So you need to approach them directly. And when you approach them directly, when there is an interaction during the application, then you can detect whether it is a human being and whether what is said is trustworthy or not by embedding a kind of a tool that can do that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also the concept of trying to sift through noise when we're talking about the security aspect is, at least currently, right, more towards Stephen's point around attacking of systems, right? Most of the organizations that I'm speaking with today on the human element either don't have a system in place for doing checking or don't have it early enough in their processes, right? And the recruiting or wherever it's going to be. So you're checking when somebody's already a part of an organization, well, you might already have a problem. So most of the noise is around, and from my vantage point, has been cybersecurity proper, and there's other ways of dealing with that. But on the human element, it's not enough signal today, and not enough signal early enough.
And I would argue, Alfredo, that quite a lot of organizations don't even know, number one, that there are tools that can do this, but that they should be doing this. They're still trusting. And this whole thing boils down to trust. And I think the hiring managers and HR and C-suite and leadership needs to educate their people all the way down that there are very real threats out there and they need to be looking at this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, a real gap in the knowledge of solutions to get started looking at this, if nothing else.
Yeah. Stephen?
Yeah, it's just, the threat vector has changed. The old vector is still there, but I think what we have to do is identify the tools and implement the processes that will continuously validate trust. I mean, that's really what it's about, because good people go bad. There's sleeper cells. There's all kinds of stuff. People are patient, but there's got to be, people have to recognize this is a new threat landscape with generative AI at the forefront, and they need to identify those tools, because a lot of people just don't think that way. If you talk to a lot of CISOs, they're starting to think about it now, but they're experts in protecting their networks. They're not experts in protecting against insider human threats.
Absolutely. I see it every day. All right. So let's shift into some of these cool tools that everyone is hearing about so much. So Nano Banana, which is like the greatest name ever, or Google VEO3, right? The part that worries me the most when thinking about this is we're not even at the ceiling yet for these incredible technologies. What we've seen so far with deepfakes and synthetic docs is just really the warm up. So tools like VO3 or Gemini's Nano Banana model, they're already producing content that is so incredibly realistic that it is nearly impossible to verify with the human eye alone, which raises the question, as tools like VO3 and Nano Banana, they push these AI generated media into near perfect realism. How are threat actors already taking advantage of this leap in technology? And what does that mean for agencies trying to separate the real signals from the synthetic noise?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I love this topic because those tools have come online very recently to get to that level of realism, and I think that the part of the scary thing is that it doesn't even have to be that good. It just has to be good enough and fast, right? So you need to reach scale if we're talking about the disinformation problem, or if we're talking about one-on-one human sort of attack, right? Get to an organization before they know they need to be protected, right? So the speed aspect, I think, is a big part of it. tools like Veo3 and Nano Banana provide speed to almost anyone, very low technical barrier of entry, right? Don't
If
have
any,
to be very tech. Yeah.
if any, I mean, I
Yeah.
can use.
If you can use the browser, right, then you can do it, right? What we were observing is after the release of Veo 3, we saw the use of that engine to create malicious videos to disinform on world conflicts almost immediately, right? Within days. Experts could analyze the videos themselves for watermark features that Google has been embedding, utilizing their watermarking feature SynthID for indicators of Google creation, but the average person can't, right? And the reach moves really, really fast. And that is both for disseminating content at the industrial level. I want to change hearts and minds across a broad swath of folks, and the individual level. I'm going to deep fake, Shawnee today because there's a picture of her, right? And I could start with that and then do a face swap on this call and is it me or not? That can be done so quickly. And I think that, to your education point, to start with, it can happen to you. It's really easy, right? And I think we're at the point where, if you remember, where people when we first started doing testing for like email phishing, right, that was targeted, people thought, this is weird, why do I have to deal with this? But you got used to it because it became very common. That's sort of where we're at in early days of deepfake attacks on individuals and more broadly industrial, right? So it'll have to become more common to understand these, how easy it is to do these things and to defend against them. It's early days now, but it's coming quick.
Mhm. And Stephen, I can imagine with you in banking and finance and things like that, this is a very, very real threat in these industries too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the scale that it's happening and the speed. It's just unprecedented. So the good news is there's a lot of innovation out there. People will find ways to build new products and commercialize them to sort of solve these problems. Validate has an amazing solution um, that can address, truthfulness with people. But I think we're reaching into a new era here. There's going to be a lot of new innovation. There has to be to kind of prevent and make this safe for everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
also,
if I can add for what Steve said. So I think that in an era that you can create a perfect false, you need to find where are the cracks. So where is the AI cannot fake? In this case, what we found, based on our experience, is that with the physiological stress, when you collect physiological biomarker, those things, yet the AI cannot fake.
Can you,
Like
I
when
mean,
you need a live human being and monitor him in real time, collecting physiological biomarkers from his face, such as the polygraph, for example, blood pressure, respiration, and other, those the AI cannot fake. And then you can take advantage of this and provide the prediction whether it's a real human being or not, and whether what he's saying is truth or suspicious to be fraudulent.
that's just such a force multiplier to be able to have that information.
Yeah.
that's huge. And I wanted to kind of point that out, is that within my research in this area, I cover a lot of different vendors and groups that are doing tests for synthetic or not, right? Is it synthetic or not, and at what levels? Um, I'd be hard pressed to find a bunch of other groups that are doing our test of whether or not the individual, however they're being represented, is telling the truth or not. And having any sort of gauge on that is a really unique uh, feature set.
Mhm. All right. Let's shift a little bit into field investigations, and that real-time trust that we're talking about is so important. So imagine you are a border agent or a first responder. Aviva had mentioned kind of these situations, or you're at the scene of some crisis. You don't at that time have the luxury of a background check or a 2-week investigation. You have usually seconds or minutes to decide who to trust. So how can agencies support these frontline decisions when stakes are that high and time really is of the essence?
Yeah, so for me, I don't need to imagine it. I experienced before lots of times. And I particularly remember a case that we were chasing after a terrorist, after a terror attack, and we were misled by a witness. we didn't have any scientific tool or any accurate tool that can validate what he says. And we lost precious time that can cost us in losing the terrorist. So then I was thinking to myself, and by the way, this is one of the visions creating and developing validated AI technology. If I could have a remote, easy to use polygraph level tool that can help me make better decision and faster decision while I'm in the field, without a need to have those equipment of the polygraph or to do a vast investigation or to do a crisscross with the data and others. And I think that when you can provide these two for Phil and the agent, then you can help him to work faster and not to lose precious time.
Yeah, you definitely have seen it real time. Yeah, I'm curious what you think about this. When you have these decisions to make, rapid fire, what do you do? How do you handle it?
So in real estate, again, there are different scenarios. One scenario that we used or we use validate is not so much on the spot, real time decisions. Is we really evaluate our tenants. If they are truthful or not. We want like to build communities in our buildings, and we want to make sure that we have like people that can be truthful, and we don't end up with people that are extreme, or like in extreme cases also where terrorists. So we use, in addition to the background check that covers us, I don't know, 70% maybe. The rest is covered by Validate AI with like few questions that evaluate the truthfulness of a person. And we have great results. We also track it with the payment the payment process, and if people there is a correlation between their truthfulness and the fact that they pay on time. And we found we found a very close correlation. So this is one scenario that we use validate. The other one is more like really related to wire and wire fraud. We just added this step in order to understand like if this is the real person, or can we validate, and if there are like changes in the instructions, and except of the very detailed process that we had before. Now we added also a step with validate for to identify that this is a real person, and what the information that this person provides us is truthful.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I'll say also that, I think about use cases like the overlaps of, we look at it as like cyber physical systems overlaps. I think a lot about building and installation access. And in many cases, right, you are bringing over researchers, or you're bringing over different groups that you're working with that you've never met in person, right? You've talked with them digitally only, and they show up to your site. And it's difficult to think through other factors to check against that might be more useful than telling the truth about X or Y or Z, and being able to check that at the point of entry, that that person is who they say they are, they have the credentials, and they're not, falsifying any information right in front of me, to have that layer of assurance before, granting access into site installation, building, you name it, and tying that back to their digital persona and identity. That check happened, it happened at this place, it was good, and now we've got a history on it. All these things really start to work together. And a lot of groups are moving that way, right? Because a lot of times our physical access has been separate from our cyber access, and that can no longer really be the case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another layer, if you will, is human judgment, right? There's always that fear that AI is going to replace human judgment. But if you pay attention to the stories, there's some really great stories about how AI is just wrong. It can't handle things. It doesn't have that human brain to process what's happening. I think in 2021 in the Moscow Chess Open, an AI robot was playing chess against a 7-year-old boy, and the boy moved so quickly, his chess piece, that the robot freaked out and broke his finger. We need human judgment. And when it comes to deception detection, it feels more like man and machine collaboration. But how can AI agents give real-time insights without removing that human judgment from the whole process?
Yeah, Shawnee, I don't think it replaces it, or shouldn't anyways, but I think we can leverage the AI to sharpen it, right? To basically see the things that we otherwise, the subtle things that we wouldn't know. It's sort of like night vision goggles, right? They don't tell you what to do, but they allow you to see stuff that you otherwise couldn't, right? It's the general idea.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, I totally agree with Steve. It's like in a war, you cannot win the war only with airplanes. You need the human side of the story. So it's a win-win situation. For me, it's a kind of a partnership. Like there is the AI tool that help me to see better, like when I'm having glasses, and spot liking things that I cannot see by a human eye. And then there is my judgment, and I am in control. I'm the manager, not the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Alfredo, are you seeing this as an issue?
In terms of overlaps there and retaining judgment, absolutely. I think that, more than replacing people, just a lot of individuals in various areas are being asked to do more, right? Process more tickets, process more individuals, do, whatever that is. And to be able to offload some of the technical cognitive load to an AI system, right, can be really, really helpful. You would have to pay attention closer if you didn't have these other signals to help guide your thinking, right? Raise that risk level in the individual's mind, the agent's mind, the human that's involved in the process, or not, right? Maybe I don't need to spend as much cognitive load on this particular thing because everything looks great, right? The behaviors are on, they super truthful return on the responses. They've got the right validation credentials. Let's move to the next one, right? So that you can prioritize in the moment, given the volume of particular issues you need to be thinking about in the field or at the desk, as it were.
Absolutely. And Yael, you had mentioned something, we have a poll question that popped up. So we can do that real quick. What is the main blind spot in current screening methods used by agencies? They cost too much money, they miss behavior intent and real-time deception, they are not used frequently enough, or they always require advanced hardware. There should be like an all of the above option here. Yeah, I was going to say, you had mentioned that you use Validate for backgrounds, screening and things like that. And especially when we're looking at people in higher risk or higher trust positions, that's really a critical piece that people miss. Agencies still lean heavily on background checks and structured interviews, but honestly, right, those were only going to tell you what someone looked like yesterday, to your earlier point. So what blind spots are we still missing, and how should we rethink screening for tomorrow's threats?
Yeah, the background check that we do for our residential just checks, that the person can pay the rent, nothing else. But again, we add this person to a building that has already a community, and we want to make sure that this person is I don't want to say good person, but a person that can be, let's start with be truthful, that because if this person lies about very basic things, this can be an indication for like extreme behavior. And so until now we have people that pay, but they are not good neighbors, but in the extreme way. What is the definition of good neighbors? But I'm talking about people that just do some extreme things in our community, and they pay on time. So we know that background check is not enough. And we ask them, as I mentioned before, some very basic questions just to make sure that this person can be, whatever this person says is the truth. And we see, we got the indication from Validate about few of them that they have the indication that they don't speak truthfully, and it's funny because some of them pulled their application immediately after we approached them, and it means something. It means that this works. And so what we see, it works. It works for us. It's another layer. It doesn't bring us to 100%, but again, the background check maybe brings us to 70%. This as like a significant percentage of this person is not only real but also very speaks the truth.
Right.
I had not considered that, but that was a really interesting point. We have a lot of research around the concept of preemptive cybersecurity and how we get ahead of, well, let's just say security writ large. I had not considered it, but the thought of a system like this as a deterrent, right? So a bad actor comes in, they see they're going to have to pass this check in addition to the ones they were expecting, and say, oh, never mind, turn around and go do something else. Deterrence can be a really powerful indicator of usefulness around preemption, and I think that's a really good point that you made there, Yael.
That's something that I thought of also is we all know, names of traders like Montez, Hansen, Ames, Pitts. The thing that all these people had in common is they passed the government's gold standard checks, right? Polygraph examinations, exhaustive background investigations, periodic re-investigations. But still, once they were on the inside, their motivations changed. Money, ideological resentment, things like that. But it all came after they already had access. And that is what concerns me a lot. I literally lose sleep over this because when you look at the government with all of its resources, right, and all of the checks and balances, and it's struggling to catch people like this and catch those shifts in time, how much harder is it for the private sector to do this, especially for companies without polygraph? Who has a polygraph machine and a certified polygrapher sitting in their closet? They don't have classified clearance processes. They don't have that constant reinvestigation cycle. So, Aviva, I want to ask you, how do businesses build realistic ongoing systems to detect when trust erodes before it turns into the bad thing like sabotage or espionage?
So this is a great question because of my background, I was wonder, and it was very weird for me once I was retired and started to work in the commercial industry. How come they are not doing all those background checks and polygraph and others? Like, it's so obvious for me, and I know that even though it's not 100% covers all, as you mentioned. And I think that the reason is that there is no awareness, and the tools that they were till the recent years were too intrusive, not only expensive, too intrusive, not friendly, frictional tools. And what was needed, and this is what I understand, and this is one of the foundation building this technology, is a tool that can be embedded in the system in any application process naturally, without friction with the end user, something that happens naturally, like fulfilling a survey or any other thing. But during the answering, then you are taking the monitoring of the physiological biomarkers to predict regarding the statement. Getting back to what Yael said, so those kind of screening tool for potential tenants, for example, helps not only with the funds, also with the understanding of past misconduct, thing that you cannot find in background checks, for example. So what I think that what we built, and this is what I believe, that what you need to do is to build a kind of a trust radar, a kind of a paradigm, a program in your company, in the commercial company, that you have checkpoint to the employee journey, that you need to revalidate him which means understanding whether there is a change in motivation, as you mentioned. And you need to take checkpoints such as promotion, such as a change of rules, and then you can get this indication and can be much more ensure that everything is fine. So the same thing happened, by the way, with insurance companies or any delicate positions that you need to figure out that there isn't internal fraud as was in Coinbase. So in my mind, what you need to do is something constant, something very, very embedded in the practice, not only saying it or doing it in first doing it all the way. So this is something that need to be changed, and I think that it is also the CISO job to understand it and actually teach the company, the executive, that this is the way they should take with friendly tools.
Yeah. And normalizing it, right? Making people understand that this is part of the process and we're doing this to protect you and your job, right? That's the bottom line here. Stephen.
Yeah, Shawnee, it's interesting. Most companies today have a pretty mature security training that they perform, whether it's how to identify a phishing email, ransomware attack, um, corruption, all these types of rules that they'll put their employees through training once or twice a year. I think what they need to do is adapt that, come up with something else that's kind of non-invasive, like what Validate does, that does an ongoing truth assessment. Like you said, you just don't do a background check and then you let them in the door. It's like maybe every 6 months you should put them through an interactive, non-invasive truth assessment, just like they're learning about ransomware and phishing attacks and everything else, and they actually have to score something. I think that's probably the future.
Yeah, I think there's a great market for parents here with their kids, by the way. Aviva, I think you need to think about this. I'll be the first one to buy it. Yeah.
What I always say, and I said it before, when my children ask me to bring the polygraph machine into the house, that I'm not mixing between business and pleasure. So let's keep this one and let them lie.
Yeah, Elle, you were going to say something?
What I wanted to say is that really the questions that we ask are, again, except of the validation question, what day is today and what is your name, is like we ask if the information that you provided is real. This is the question that we ask, and people fail on that question. We don't ask any invasive question. This is the question that we ask. And it can be very basic and very simple. It took us like time to work with Validate and our legal team to ask what question can we ask, but it can be very basic question that people just fail on this question. Did you provide only truthful information?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Totally agree. Non-invasive, simple questions and see how they respond. What's going to come out of that is a red light, yellow light, or green light, right? Kind of at a simple sort of view. The ones that sort of turn that red light on, you go, okay, we need to go have a conversation with that person. Yellow, we probably need to continuously monitor. Maybe, oh, you need to do this again in a month. And then, the green guys, we'll see in 6 months. Who knows?
Yeah, it's not like my CIA and NSA and DIA polygraphs where they make you cry. It's not like that. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to kind of wrap it up with one closing question, and I'd love each of you to answer briefly if you can. So if you were advising a federal CISO or a procurement lead, where should they start? What's the first practical step agencies need to take today to prepare for these evolving threats?
I'll take a look at that because my view is probably a little bit different. So most of the groups I'm talking about are not necessarily in the field, but are looking at the broader digital landscape, digital estate. So two things really. It's what are you doing for your organization, department, unit around narrative intelligence for what's being said about your group and leadership around the world, and sort of heat mapping potential risk. And then two, if and when your direct reports come to you and say, hey, I think this thing is a deep fake attempt or something of that nature, where are you going to send them to check it, right? So what do you have tooling for that or not? So I think those two things is where I'd start today.
Leave it.
I think I would, if I was talking to a CISO, I would say, start small, but find something. Find something non-invasive and learn from this. Start to build your capabilities where you're not evasive to your staff and partners and vendors, but start small and scale.
Baby steps, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I would say don't treat this information as a contact problem. Deal with that as a human trust problem. And today, adopt tools that can help you to validate the authenticity of the person and whether you can trust him. Do it today for the foundation of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing I would add is, but educate your staff, your employees. Tell them why you're doing this. Make sure they understand what these threats are. Give them some real world examples, and then, layer in the tools as it makes sense.
Absolutely. And yeah.
Yeah, it's it's very simple to implement and validate. So comparing to other cybersecurity tools that took us in some cases some months to implement and install, this is like really a very simple layer that adds trust in this process. So it's very simple. It's like overnight almost to implement, validate, and it adds another layer.
Yeah, for sure. So just like you said, that all of this comes down to trust. It's very simply, it's just trust. Deepfakes and disinformation and insiders, they all exploit one thing, and that is our instinct to believe what we see, what we hear, what we know about the people around us. Technology alone is not going to fix that, but if we think about verification and focusing on intent and arming our people with tools that actually enhance, not replace, their judgment, we can absolutely stay one step ahead. And because in the end, if you think about it, disinformation and insider threats, they're not just technical problems. Steve has said this multiple times. These are human problems. Aviva has said this multiple times, right? It's solving them by starting with how we train and how we protect and how we empower our people and adding those layers of tools. So I know we're almost at time. I want to thank all of our panelists. I know Alfredo had to jump off just now. Thank you so much for everyone in the audience who has joined, and we really look forward to seeing you next time. If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to CARAHCAST or reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. I'm sure anyone would be happy to answer any questions.